Introducing Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Icon of the Seas, the ultimate family vacation. The ultimate 6 slides, 8 neighborhoods, 0 compromise vacation. The ultimate never done that, can't wait to do it vacation. The ultimate chillin' by a different pool every day of the week vacation. This is the Icon of Vacations. Icon of the Seas, arriving in 2024. Book today. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
This episode is brought to you by FX's Feud, Capote versus the Swans. Inspired by actual events, the series tells the story of Truman Capote and the women he betrayed. The original housewives. They were society's most elite women. Rich, glamorous socialites who defined a bygone era of high society New York. From creator Ryan Murphy, this drama series features an all-star cast, including Naomi Watts, Demi Moore, and Diane Lane. FX's Feud premieres January 31st on FX Stream on Hulu.
Hockey fans, are you ready to brave the wild? With me, your host, Paladino Joey. Brave the Wild is available on the sportstuff.com and on iTunes. I thank each and every one of you always for downloading and listening to this show. It's a pleasure to be back on the air once again today. And ladies and gentlemen, I predicted the Wild to go 2-2 this past week, but I figured they'd get 5 out of 8 points. Well, like I was talking about on the last show, if they got 8 points, it would be truly remarkable. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Minnesota Wild did get 8 points this past week, and yes, it is truly remarkable. How can you not be excited right now to be a Minnesota Wild fan? I mean, I'm just I'm blown away. I'm just stunned. I mean, Devin Dubnyk, that's all I got to say, Devin Dubnyk. Just look at the goals allowed this past week. Just look at it. Against Toronto, the Wild win 2-1. Against New York, the Wild win 2-1. In a shootout. It went to a shootout, so I was right about that prediction, that it would get out of regulation, but only 1 goal allowed. And the Wild ultimately win in the shootout. 2 goals allowed against Calgary. That was a late score, too, by Marcus Granlund, the younger brother of Mikhail Granlund. And a 4-1 victory by the Wild tonight against the LA Kings in a back-to-back effort. Devin Dubnyk played in all 4 games. Yeah, you can kind of guess where I'm headed when we get to the awards segment. But also, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'd stopped mentioning the number of the episodes on the show. Of course, I number them as I'm doing the shows and put them on the websites and everything. So you still know what the episode number is, but I didn't mention it on the shows as much. That's just a little advice I was given in the past. But on this episode, I must, and I mean must, make an exception. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is the 100th episode of Brave the Wild. That's correct. So it couldn't come at a better time to have such a positive week for the Minnesota Wild. The only thing better would be maybe they win the Stanley Cup or go to the Stanley Cup Finals or something. Yeah, that would be, there's a lot of better things, we'll say, but a undefeated week, that's a nice way to symbolize where we're headed with the Minnesota Wild. And on this episode, per se, it's a very all-around positive episode, which means very unlikely I'm going to be passing out a James Shepard Memorial this week. And in fact, in advance, I'm going to say I will not be passing out a James Shepard Memorial this week. This is just going to be a show that has a smile on my face and a smile on many of you out there across the Great Divide. Our Minnesota Wild fans, regardless if you live in Minnesota, Iowa, Kansas, Canada, or Finland. And I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe there's a possibility that some Finns out there listen to Brave the Wild, because I hear a lot of Finns like Minnesota. And, of course, the Minnesota Wild have a lot of Finns on their team, maybe even some Swedish as well. But anyhow, let's get on with it. This show is probably going to be slightly longer than normal, because we will have a third segment, and it's going to be all about episode number 100. So, with no further ado, Monday, March the 23rd, the Minnesota Wild head to Toronto, Ontario, the home of the fabled Toronto Maple Leafs. At least they were once upon a time, but they haven't won a Stanley Cup since, well, the first year that the second wave of expansion hit the NHL. Or, well, let's call it the first wave of expansion, to be quite honest. Now, just because they're the original 6 doesn't mean they're the only 6 teams that ever existed, because there was an older Ottawa Senators back in the day. There was a Seattle Metropolitans, and there were other teams as well. So, just saying, they were the 6 remaining original teams out there, and there was a span there where they were the original teams. Or, I mean, there were only 6 teams at the time as well, because other teams disbanded or whatever. Unfortunate for them. But then we had another wave of 6. That was the North Stars, the Flyers, the Penguins, the Blues, who went to the finals that year. Good for them. That was the last time they've been. Or was it? Yeah, they went 2 years in a row, I believe, 1968, and they lost, and they haven't been back. Damn. So the Blues and the Toronto Maple Leafs haven't been back to the Stanley Cup Finals since. Oh, that hurts. And they haven't won either. So, on to the Toronto Maple Leafs. The team that looked like they were going to be promising, and when they actually did make the playoffs at times in the mid 90s, they went on a playoff run, a lot like the New York Islanders. This year, I had a nice feeling about them, and in fact, a couple of years ago, I had them in the finals with St. Louis. How crazy is that? That would have been the greatest finals ever. Or was it Boston and St. Louis? But whatever. We'll worry about that. We'll worry about that some other time. Devin Dubnyk was amazing in this game, getting 35 saves against the Toronto Maple Leafs, who've been struggling mightily. Really mightily. And the Wild win their 9th straight road game. Unbelievable. Just unfreaking believable. Just everything fantastic about the Wild this week. Everything positive. Air Canada Centre, over 18,000 people were there and watched the Wild win 2-1. Now, this is going to be a tale of 2 lines this week as well. Early in the week, the third line was the heroes. And in fact, most of the week, to be quite honest. Charlie Coyle and Thomas Vanek hook up on the first goal very late in the first period. Coyle's 11th goal of the season, Vanek's 30th assist. That was wonderful. And then Vanek early in the third. And this game was a kind of a grinded out type of game. The Wild the Wild just were not scoring goals because Bernier, is a excellent goalie. There's no doubt about it. It's just Toronto's just overall play hasn't been up to par. But they played very well in this particular night. And a lot of us were wondering, man, my goodness, are the Wild going to win this one? Who knows? Toronto putting 36 shots on net. 36 shots on net. Jake Gardiner getting his 4th goal of the season. With about 6 minutes left, put Toronto back in it. Put Toronto back in it, pardon me. A 2-1 game. They continued to pepper Devin Dubnyk, but Dubnyk shut them down at every opportunity they had. It didn't even matter. Even though the Wild weren't scoring, because Bernier is a really good goalie, and even though Toronto was attacking him, it just didn't matter. Devin Dubnyk, no matter how well the second line played, or at least they factored in the scoring per se, they were clutch in the moments they needed to be. They finished when they needed to. Devin Dubnyk, ultimately, the hero, night in and night out this entire week, and he was against the Toronto Maple Leafs in a very an unattractive game to watch. But hey, if you like goalies, it was a great game. Yeah, without a doubt. Bernier and Dubnyk, of course, Dubnyk winning that duel. So back-to-backs, both cases this week, both duos of games were back-to-backs. That's another reason I thought the Wild were not going to have a sweep this week. It just shows how remarkable they're playing right now. How remarkable are the Minnesota Wild playing right now? It's just, oh my God. And I'll be talking about that in the second segment about their standing right now. It's just, yeah. Okay, I'll say it right now, but I'll get more into it in the second segment. The Wild are now in 3rd place in the division. They are now a division leader. They are no longer a wild card. At least for this moment, they're 1 point ahead of the Chicago Blackhawks. And there isn't a soul that could have told you the Minnesota Wild would be ahead of the Chicago Blackhawks this season. Even when we were playing good, there was, the odds of that happening were pretty slim. When we were playing terribly, that's like climbing Mount Everest on a unicycle. Basically, what's next? We're going to catch Nashville? Well, don't look now, but we're within 7 points of the Nashville Predators. I mean, it's unlikely, but is there anything left to doubt right now? Is there anything left to doubt with this team right now? And if the Minnesota Wild somehow win this division, or even more insane, somehow win the President's Trophy, all the conversation of, okay, Devin Dubnyk, he should be in the conversation of Hart Trophy. Yeah, he should be in the Hart Trophy conversation, which for those of you that might be new to hockey, he's the most valuable player in the National Hockey League, the Hart Trophy. And no, it's got to go to Price of Toronto, or excuse me, Montreal. It's got to go to him. It can't go to Dubnyk. He came too late. It's just too late. You can't give it to him. No, if the Wild finished with the division championship or top record in all of hockey, anything like that, I'm sorry, Devin Dubnyk's the Hart Trophy winner. End of story. Ball game. Devin Dubnyk wins the MVP of all of hockey. I'm sorry. There is just no argument for me at that point. If he doesn't get it, that's an absolute shame and a joke. Okay, Tuesday, March 24th, Minnesota heads into New York, Islander land. The Isle. Before they move to Brooklyn, it'll be the Wild's last chance to play in the Island. Nassau Veterans Memorial. Yes, sir. Only 16,000 in attendance because it's a small arena and it's old. And it hosted the great dynasty of the early 80s, the New York Islanders back then when they were, awesome and unbelievable. 4 straight Stanley Cups, and they kicked the North Stars' butt, much to our chagrin. As great as the North Stars were during that run, the Islanders were greater, and they steamrolled, they buzzsawed the North Stars. So this will be our last opportunity to play in that building. Unfortunately, it's all over. It's a dump and all that stuff, but it kind of sucks to see them leaving the Isle and heading to Brooklyn. Oh, goody. What good did it do the Brooklyn Nets? Yeah, they just spent a lot of money. They got slightly better for a little while, and then, bam, they're garbage. They suck. Is that going to help the Islanders? I don't know. At least the Islanders are playing better right now, and I think that's a good thing. I like the Islanders. I'm actually quite happy to see them playing well, to be quite honest. Another goalie duo, by the way, because Yaroslav Halak is back in net like I was talking about, and I figured he was going to be a problem in this game. And it could have been. He stopped 31 shots. 31 shots. The Wild only scored once. Ultimately, they beat him in the shootout. But the two best players for both teams were the heroes in the scoring columns. John Tavares with his 34th goal and Zach Parise with a wonderful 29th goal of the season. Top line right there. Actually, that was a power play goal. Pardon me. Pominville, Koivu, and Parise getting together in that one. Actually, it wasn't a power play. I don't know what they were together in that one. It looked like a power play at the time. It did, but yeah, it was a regulation goal. Granlund, I guess they just threw in Koivu for this one. It was like the old line right there, and the same power play line that everybody got sick of seeing too, to be quite honest. But hey, they scored here on this one. Parise attacking the net and finishing like he does best. John Tavares, one of the elite up-and-comers in all of hockey. 34th goal on the season. Ultimately, Zach Parise was the MVP of this game, without a doubt. Even though Devin Dubnyk was fantastic, stopping 37 shots, you could argue he was the MVP. I mean, without a doubt, you could argue that. 37 shots for Devin Dubnyk as the Islanders controlled the puck and attacked the Wild zone the entire night, peppered Devin Dubnyk. All that talent in the Island. Just, they were fantastic. They dominated the puck almost the whole night. But Zach Parise, he's the hero at the end of the day, because not only did he score the goal that tied the game midway through the third period, he also, being only the second guy to attempt a shot, the first guy for the Wild to attempt a shot in the shootout, he was able to score on it. And then ultimately, that's all that mattered at the end of the day, because Devin Dubnyk stopped all 3 shots he faced. Nobody was scoring on Dubnyk on this particular night. So technically 40 saves, to be quite honest. Technically 40 saves for Devin Dubnyk in that night. So I guess they're co-MVPs for the evening. But Zach Parise and Devin Dubnyk, you could say, literally all the stars of the teams came out on this night. Both goalies are either the top or the second best player on both teams. And, of course, Zach Parise and Tavares, the leading scorers. So it's like, there you go. Fantastic there. Nice finish for the Wild. And it's quite fine that the Islanders get a point out of it because they're not in our conference. We know that. And I'd like to see the Islanders succeed in the Eastern Conference as long as we don't somehow lose to them in the Stanley Cup Finals. But right now, I don't think we would. I like our chances against the Islanders right now if the Wild played them in the finals. Not sure about the Rangers. We'll be talking about them soon. We'll see. Who knows? Calgary Flames come to town. Calgary Flames come to town Friday, March the 27th. And as I predicted, the Wild pull out the brooms. They pull out the brooms in a game that was close for quite a while. And actually, actually Calgary scored early in this one. Only 6 minutes into the game, Josh Jurish with his 12th goal of the season. Matt Dumba on the power play with his 8th goal of the season. About 5 minutes later, tying it up. Getting that slap shot off, putting it on net like he does, and it went by yet again. Matt Dumba, 8th goal of the season. There's no way he'll ever see the minor leagues again unless he just, his turnovers kill him somehow and his confidence goes straight down. But ultimately, the second line connecting on another one, the third line connecting on another one. Vanek, there it is, his 20th goal of the season and his 10th consecutive season with at least 20 goals. Congratulations, Thomas Vanek, Justin Fontaine, and Charlie Coyle, both connecting as the Wild just took over in the third period. They just took over in the third period. It was third line, second line, and first line ultimately in the game. Oh, as it was Vanek, Koivu, and Parisi ultimately. You could have said that would have been the Wild's top line back maybe a couple of years, I don't know, about maybe 4 years ago or something. That would be a Wild's top line. It would have been, because, say, there was no Granlund at the time. Stuff like that. You get the idea. There's no Granlund, maybe even, Pominville wasn't here yet, that type of thing. There you go. But, all three of them scored in the third period. Kind of like how they used to say earlier in the season when the Flames were looking really, really damn good. They're like the best third period team in all of hockey. They come at you, guns a-blazing. They are flamethrowers, pardon the pun, in the third period as they attack the hell out of Devan Dubnyk time and time again in the past in the Saddle Dome. And Devan Dubnyk stopped everything that came his way, and the Wild would win close ones, 1-0 or 2-1, as they did. This one, the floodgates opened this time, as the Wild were the team on the attack in the third period. This time around, as of course nobody scored in the second, it was typical Minnesota-Calgary grinded out hockey for a long freaking time. But that third period, the floodgates opened, and the Wild took over, and Marcus Granlund was able to, make a second goal for Calgary. But it was too little too late, ultimately, for them. As Devan Dubnyk did what he does, stop shots. He amazingly was not one of the 3 stars in this game. Zach Parise, Mikko Koivu, Thomas Vanek, the 3 stars, ultimately. In this one, Dubnyk stopping only 23 shots in this game. So that's a huge reason why he wouldn't be a top star, because the Wild dominated the puck more in this one, certainly, than the Calgary Flames. I mean, without a doubt, 35 shots against Kare Ramo of the Calgary Flames. He just couldn't face what the Wild had coming his way in that third period, and that was fantastic for us. Without a doubt, the Wild were only on 1 power play, and they converted on it. The Flames were shut down by the number 1 penalty kill in all of hockey twice throughout the game. The Wild dominated the puck for the most part. And what's funny, though, the funniest thing of all is how the Wild were peppering Ramo in that second period. Much more in the first and second period than they did in the third. They were just finishing on their goals in the third period, and it ultimately spelled doom for the Calgary Flames. And unfortunately for them, right now, if the season ended today, the Calgary Flames do not make the playoffs. And I think that's a rotten shame, because I like the Flames a lot more than the Kings and especially the Vancouver Canucks and the Winnipeg Jets. I like the Kings more. I like the Kings the second most out of that group. As for, Winnipeg and Vancouver, they could just fall off the face of the earth as far as I'm concerned. I can't stand them. I just cannot stand those teams. I like Calgary quite a bit, even though I barely recognize the roster compared to a couple of years ago. But whatever. It is what it is, and good for them that they're back in contention again, because it seemed like when they suck, they stay bad forever, and it's sad. It's like 10 years of sucking, kind of like the Blackhawks did for the longest time, but I'm sure we'd take that back once again. Tonight, Saturday, March the 28th, the Minnesota Wild defeat the Los Angeles Kings 4-1, and yes, there was an empty netter by Mikko Koivu, but ultimately the stat of the night here, you could say, other than Devan Dubnyk being fantastic again, is he stopped everything that came his way, except for Dwight King's 11th goal of the season early in the second period. Basically everything that came Devan Dubnyk's way, shut it down like he did all night, and all you heard was doobs all night. And the Wild special teams phenomenal again, stopping all 3 power plays. And yes, that year helped when you have Devin Dubnyk in net versus Darcy Kemper and Nicholas Backstrom, but also converting on the power play again. 1 of 2, just fantastic. The overall special teams of the Wild, unbelievable. They also blocked 24 shots by the Kings, who did dominate the puck pretty much the entire frickin' night, especially in that second period. And the Kings were the only team to score in that second period also. 17 shots on goal for the LA Kings in the second period, 32 overall for the night. The Wild very quiet with their shots, but they were finishing on them again. That's what's nice. I mean, they were just finishing on them. Good for us. Ultimately, another thing that did help is Jonathan Quick had to leave the game. Started off, the Wild scored 2 goals against him. Nino Niederreiter with his 23rd of the year. And yes, the second line scored on every single goal tonight. Every single goal. Nino Niederreiter. A +4 on the evening. Just unbelievable. Chris Stewart, man, he is everywhere. He got 2 assists in the night. Great passer. Always where he needs to be. Puts the puck exactly where you need it. Mikko Koivu, just an unbelievable, huge night for him. 3 points for him, assisting on Niederreiter's goal. Then he scored as he was driving to the net. Chris Stewart feeding Koivu, basically like a lead pass, and Koivu finished it. That was fantastic. Chris Stewart on the power play, as Spurgeon shot the puck on net. Scandella also getting the puck to Spurgeon first. Spurgeon getting the puck on net, and Niederreiter deflecting it on the power play. 24th goal of the season. That was fantastic. And then again, Koivu with his second goal of the game and 14th of the season on the empty net, as the Kings had an empty net with a 3-1 game. They're just doing what they can because they're still no guarantee to make the postseason. That's unfortunate for them, but I certainly would not miss the Kings if they were out of the playoffs, because I want the Wild to be the LA Kings now, the team that's maybe they're not like a favorite to win a cup, but then again maybe they kind of are lately. But yeah, you get the idea. They're not high in the standings, but they're this unbeatable force that rides all their way to the Stanley Cup. That would be truly awesome to be, without a doubt. Jonathan Quick faced 9 shots and 2 goals against, unfortunately for him. But again, like I said, Dubnyk, 31 saves, and all you heard was doobs all night, like you've heard every night lately. Another guy who's back in the mix again is Ryan Carter, and that means you're probably never going to see Sean Bergenheim again. I don't think he's going to play ever again at this point. Braziak hurt a bit after the fight last night. Also scratched in the against the LA Kings tonight. So there you go. Jordan Schrader on the ice. Kyle Braziak off. That's good for him, without a doubt. But ultimately, when Jason Zucker returns, unfortunately for Jordan Schrader, I don't think we're going to be seeing him very much, barring an injury. But see, it's a good thing to have so much depth, because if there is an injury, Jordan Schrader, baby, out on the ice at that speed and that explosiveness that he has, and he's also a pretty good passer too. I mean, he's always breaking loose and getting a shot on goal, getting to the net, which you gotta love Jordan Schrader. It's just his lack of special team skills that is hurting him. And that, and just like in football as well, it's harder to make the team when you can't play in special teams. So hopefully Jordan Schrader can do that in the future. That's what used to hurt Jason Zucker in the past. And that's also why he was always in the AHL for about 2 years there. And it was also because he couldn't play on the fourth line. He had to play on a skill line, either 1 or 2. And when he wasn't good enough to be on those lines, he's not gonna be in the NHL. But then his defense got better. He started playing on the fourth line more frequently, and he was able to play on penalty kill and such, and on the power play. And it was like rock and roll. There you go. Jason Zucker makes the team and contributes in a big way. And talk is that he will be returning fairly soon, and that's good news for us, without a doubt. If Jason Zucker does return, because it's a good problem to have when you have so many scores on your team that, gosh, some guys might have to be a healthy scratch a couple nights in a row. That's a really, really nice problem to have, and that's got me so excited, so confident in this team. Because remember how good Zucker was for the longest time? I mean, he was the leading goal scorer for the longest time. He was like the only goal scorer. Him and Parisi were the only guys scoring goals back when we sucked. So imagine both of them scoring goals, and the Wild start winning again. Also, another major, cool, exciting thing of note, Zach Parisi scored his 30th goal last night. It wasn't tonight, it was last night against the Calgary Flames. So there it is, 30 goals for him. He's now the fourth Minnesota Wild player to have scored 30 goals at least in one season with the Wild. Of course, Gaborik had done it 4 times. You had Brian Ralston as well, and then you had Jason Pominville just last year, scored 30 goals for the Minnesota Wild. So there you go. Unfortunately for Pominville, I don't think he's going to be getting 30 goals this year. Nito Niederreiter, there's a small chance. Maybe he has a nice little, maybe he can throw in a hat trick here in one of the games, or maybe have another multi-goal game along the way. We'll see what happens. One other thing to note, that's a pretty interesting statistic, is Mikko Koivu in his 3-point night tonight. It was his 115th multi-point game. That's a pretty cool statistic, to be quite honest with you. Definitely had to mention that. That's a nice little statistic ultimately for him. So let's wrap up this segment with the awards, and it's going to go to one guy without a doubt. There will be no James Shepherd Memorial, even though I could almost give it to Matthew Dumba because these turnovers are killing us. But luckily, the guy who's going to win the MVP, he stopped a big one tonight when Matt Dumba turned the puck over. He saved the day, and that was, who do you freaking think? Devin Dubnyk is the Mike Modano Award winner once again for this week. Yeah, without a doubt. So, like an honorable mention for James Shepherd will be Matt Dumba because of the turnovers. He turns the puck over in front of the net way too much. It's getting scary. That's the one thing that could get him sent down one of these, at some point in the future. Though I don't think they will send him down. They're going to have to take the good with the bad, and hopefully he can learn and improve. And ultimately, that's what it's going to take. Honorable mention for, even though it's like he's far off because of how valuable Dubnyk was this entire week, just unbelievable. But an honorable mention for the Mike Modano Award winner, and it would be his first time mentioned in it because he struggled so bad for so long, and he just kind of kept getting better and better and better, and that's Thomas Vanek. If Devin Dubnyk wasn't as amazing as he was this week, like say the Wild don't go undefeated, and if maybe Vanek scored tonight when he had an opportunity on a breakaway, Thomas Vanek would have won the Mike Modano Award this week for the first time. Better late than never. So there it is, end of the review segment, about as happy as I've been. Let's come back to preview 3 games, and then on to the big 100 conversation in segment number 3.
Do you shop on Amazon? Did you know that you can support this podcast just by doing your normal shopping on Amazon? It's really easy to do. Just go to thesportstuff.com and click on one of the many Amazon pictures. Do your normal shopping, and Amazon sees that we referred you, and they give us a percentage. We'd like to thank you in advance for supporting thesportstuff.com, and please use our Amazon link. Now enjoy the rest of the show.
We are going round like Saturn
We are back here on Brave the Wild. It is time for the preview segment, and it's going to be, nice and short because there's only 2 games to preview. The Minnesota Wild, unfortunately, though, this is the unfortunate part, don't play until Thursday, April 2nd. I guess playing at home in back-to-back games wasn't the most appealing thing, I suppose. So now we'll continue our homestand, hosting 2 extremely good teams from out east. And then, of course, we'll start the next week with an arch-rival candidate with Winnipeg Monday, April 6th. But that'll have to be on next week's show. Luckily, this will work out terrific with only 2 games to preview, so we can hop right into segment number 3 and get on to episode 100 festivities, or whatever we want to call it. Thursday, April 2nd, Henrik Lundqvist and the New York Rangers come to town, a team that just might win the Eastern Conference. Yeah, and another team 2 nights later, the Detroit Red Wings, a team that's always a candidate to win the Eastern Conference, just because they're the Detroit Red Wings, and even though they haven't done that in a long time. In fact, they've actually never won the Eastern Conference because it was the Western Conference that they used to win. But let's get on with it here. I've been bouncing all over the place already. Another goalie from New York making a comeback. Is Devin Dubnyk making a comeback from injury? Is Devin Dubnyk going to change matters yet again? Well, Talbot was pretty good for the New York Rangers. Now they have the number one record in all of hockey. They've clinched the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. Well, actually, they haven't quite done that yet, but they're the first team to clinch the playoffs so far. Returning very strong since their loss to the Los Angeles Kings last year, the long-awaited LA versus New York Stanley Cup Finals that the NHL probably so desperately wants and needs. Oh, my goodness. So many good players. Girardi, Stahl on defense. Stepan. Oh, my goodness. Nash, though. Well, no, he's gone. What am I talking about? San Luis, day-to-day. Martin San Luis, day-to-day. He's pretty old anyway, right? March 16th, day-to-day with a knee injury. Ultimately, though, the Rangers have been fantastic. And there's Nash. Yep, second line, left wing, at least according to this, though I'd consider him first line. Way back on Monday, October the 27th, the New York Rangers outdueled the Wild 5-4. So this was an early sign that Kemper wasn't quite having the best night of his life. And the Rangers got it done in Madison Square Garden with 18,000 people in attendance in that one. But the fact that the Wild scored 4 goals against Lundqvist, hey, not bad. Not bad. If we do that again, I think we win the game. I think so. 30 shots put on net in that night, only 26 saved. Darcy Kemper was hideous. 5 goals given up on 20 shots. 20 shots. That's freaking hideous. Fontaine had 2 assists in that game. I remember it fairly well. It was kind of a back and forth type of game that just did not go the Wild's way, ultimately. In fact, they were doing just fine. The Wild were up 3-0, and things just completely went down the you-know-what. Just completely down the shitter. Prosser, Cook, Pominville scoring. Prosser and Cook. Jeez, what the hell? Fourth line getting it done there. Ryan Carter, all those guys. Getting it done for the Wild, up 3-0, and then the Rangers make it 3-2, then Zucker makes it 4-2. Oh, we'll be just fine. Still, but unfortunately, there's 15 minutes left in the game. Broussard, Duclair, Derek Broussard, Anthony Duclair, and Matt Zuccarello scoring along the way, much to our chagrin, and the Wild lose the game. Darcy Kemper loses his composure in that game. Just got his ass kicked. Didn't look like either team was on their way to cup contention at that time. The Wild were 4-3. The Rangers were 5-4. It's like, you had your shot last year in New York. I'm not sure you're going to really be back in it. Now, this just might be a preview of the Stanley Cup Finals. Who knows? No guarantee that it is, but it's a possibility. I mean, I got to throw that out there. The possibility exists that the Rangers and the Wild could face off, literally, in the Stanley Cup Finals come June. It's a very strong possibility. I don't think we're going to have this type of game. It's going to be quite different, to be honest. I think we're looking at a 2-1, 3-2 type game between these two teams. The Wild scoring is all over the place, though, isn't it? I mean, you score 4 goals against Calgary and L.A. Like, where the hell did that come from? The last time we played the Kings, we lost 3-0. That was unbelievable, and it was to this Jones guy that we scored 2 goals on tonight. Good for us. He's a pretty good goalie, too. Obviously, Jonathan Quick is one of the best on the planet, and everybody knows that. Lundqvist and Talbot are both good goalies. I do expect Lundqvist to be in net, especially against Devin Dubnyk. I mean, it's kind of a statement type of game, just in case we do play in the finals. It's kind of, we're getting things going here. New York Rangers with 101 points on the season. Man. Nashville with 102. So, the Nashville Predators have been playing significantly better of late. Just to mention that, they did defeat the Washington Capitals tonight, and their point total is climbing. But the Wild with 95, within 7 points after Nashville wins a game. It's getting very, very interesting right now. It's unbelievable to see Chicago and Winnipeg beneath us. But back to business here. Who wins this game? Oh, man. I mean, it's a tough call. It really is. The Wild have won 4 games in a row. They're just playing fantastic. They really are. Can they continue it, though? Luckily, the Wild are at home, and I think that gives them a slight edge, even though the Wild are actually better on the road, and they've won like 10 games in a row on the road, which is like unfreaking believable. The Wild played, they played well in New York, and then everything went down the crapper. That was what was so disappointing last time around, but again, 2 very different teams here. versus then. The Rangers not playing as well lately. They lost to the Los Angeles Kings last Tuesday. They beat Ottawa 5-1. They beat Hamburglar 5-1 in Ottawa. Wow, that's crazy. So, well, and then they lost tonight to the Boston Bruins in Boston 2-4 tonight, 4-2. 2-4. That was pretty dumb. So they're all over the place right now, even though they're doing really good in that Metropolitan Division. They're winning it right now. They're all over the place. I got to look at that Ottawa game. I mean, it's like, geez, that's kind of a tough one. The good news is, yeah, that Lundqvist was rusty. That's the good news. The bad news is he's still going to be rusty again. Hammond lost his first regulation game at this point in time, that being Hamburglar. Hammond, you know who that is. Think about it, though. They were all... Well, he got pulled. Hamburger gave up 5. Yep, they all were Hamburglar. And then Chris Dregger, took over and stopped 10 shots from the Rangers in mop-up duty. Unfortunately for him, it had to be that way in that case. They shelled Hamburglar. That's not good. The good news is Dubnyk outdueled Hamburglar last time around. Oh my, where do we go with this one? The fact that Lundqvist will probably be in net and might not be all that great yet. I'm going to pick the Wild to win 3-2. We may end up giving the Rangers a point in this one. I wouldn't be too surprised, but I have the Wild winning 3-2. Or even 4-3. I mean, the Rangers, their scoring's all over the place. I'll go 3-2 for the Wild in a possible overtime scenario. To make a long story longer, I'm extending this longer than I would have liked, and I apologize for that. So let's move on to Saturday. Because yes, we are in April now. It was Thursday, April 2nd for the Rangers. Saturday, April 4th, Minnesota and Detroit, the old rival back in the day, especially for the North Stars. But for the Wild in the Western Conference, Detroit Penguins. What am I talking about? I'm just BSing. I remember how that was the Stanley Cup Finals, but 2 years in a row. Detroit Red Wings beat the Wild 5-4 in a wonderful game for the Wild. Looked like they were going to win. They wound up with a point at least. This was a situation where it really, really looked like the Wild were dead, and then they made a huge comeback, and it was so cool, so exciting. I still remember that one very well, to be quite honest. I'm trying to see. Who was in net? Okay, that's right. I remember this very well. Right after we got Devin Dubnyk, just a couple games, he'd beaten Buffalo and in Arizona. Ooh, the two best teams in hockey. No, the two worst teams in hockey. Arizona's got a terrible record right now. They're really, really down. They're the worst team in the Western Conference now, after giving up what Dubnyk has become. Dubnyk, just awful, giving up 4 goals. By the second period, he'd faced 10 shots and stopped 6 of them, and he was pulled from the game. Think about that. Can you imagine the words Devin Dubnyk pulled? Can you imagine that right now? I mean, there's always a possibility. And then Darcy Kemper came in and was respectable. He was very respectable, stopping 14 shots the rest of the way, about midway through the game, literally halfway through the game. Yeah, because Zetterberg scored his... What am I looking at? I'm looking at the wrong thing. It wasn't Zetterberg that scored, but ultimately, yeah, it was Ouellette that scored. Yeah, less than halfway through the game. And then the Wild make a huge comeback in the third period. Parisi already his 18th goal at the time. I mean, you just see how well Parisi was playing at the time. He was carrying this team, trying to resurrect us from the dead. Not only did he score on the power play, but he had an unassisted goal on a turnover in the third period at the time to tie it up, and then ultimately we lose in the shootout, and it was devastating. The Wild, Parisi and Koivu couldn't score, and Dotsik and Nyquist both scored on their attempts. So Kemper went from great to just lame in that shootout, and I remember that oh so well. Oh, look at me extending this way too long. But, yeah, I mean, it was a history-making night for the Wild. It was a historic night. Dubnyk actually got pulled, but it was the beginning, ultimately. After that game, things changed for the Wild, and it was really cool. So that's why I extended that longer than I needed to. It was the beginning of the Wild saying, hey, we're going to start performing here. And they did. With that said, the Wild hosting the Detroit Red Wings. Do I have them winning? I guess. I mean, they have all these good players still. The Detroit Red Wings are a fantastic team, and There's no doubt about it. They have 92 points on the season. They were playing really well at the time that the Wild played them. They've doubled their losses since then. Unfortunately, we certainly haven't done that. The Wild are actually ahead of Detroit now, which is fantastic. They're third place in their division, though, so they will definitely be in the postseason, most likely. Jimmy Howard was also not in net that night. That was another major thing. He was out. So it gave us hope that the Wild might win that game. Pavel Datsyuk is day-to-day with a lower body injury. Sheehan day-to-day with an upper body injury. So they have all kinds of nagging injuries, but then again, I guess that's sports for you. Boy, how has Detroit been playing of late? That's another question. They've kind of had their ups and downs. They won tonight, though. They beat Tampa Bay 4-0. Jimmy Howard no, it wasn't Jimmy Howard, it was Mrazek. Sorry, Mrazek with a shutout. 4-0. So will he be in net again against the Wild? Maybe. Maybe. He didn't play that well against us because we beat him. We almost beat him last time around, but he was good enough in the shootouts. Howard had been struggling. Boy, five goals given up against Arizona. 6 goals given up against San Jose. That's not good. But a huge rebound tonight against the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's another thing that makes things interesting for this game coming up. I'm going to have this one be a win for the Wild. Again, a possible shootout type of situation. We'll go with 3-2 again, I suppose. 3-2 again. I know it sounds lame, but I'm not going to have 3 goals or 4 goals given up by Devin Dubnyk at any point. I don't think they're going to do it to him again. But it's going to be interesting to see how he plays against the team that did get him, that beat him up pretty bad last time. That's when it's going to make things really interesting. We're going to see what Dubnyk really is made of. What if he shuts out the Detroit Red Wings? Wouldn't that be something? That's only 2 games away for the Wild, but 4 games away for Detroit as they play the Islanders, Ottawa, and Boston before the Wild coming up. In fact, tomorrow they play the Islanders, so they're in a back-to-back situation. We'll see what happens, but Mrazek, who is definitely a goalie of the future candidate for the Detroit Red Wings, will make things quite interesting indeed. Peter Mrazek. I remember talking about him last time around. So let's wrap up this segment before I extend it any longer, other than the fact that the Wild are now are now in third place in the division and fourth place in the conference. We would have home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs right now. Just can't believe it. It's weird saying that. It would just be the first round, but it's still quite fascinating indeed. So with that, let's again take a break and come back for the 100th episode festivities. We are back here on Brave the Wild, segment number 3, 100th episode celebration for Brave the Wild. Wow, as Barry Manilow would say, looks like we made it! Yeah, we're talking a long, long time, ladies and gentlemen. This show started way back, episode number 1. Yes, it had to start at episode number 1 at some point, didn't it? Way back on August 24th, 2008. It was titled, Will Gaborik Sign or Be Traded? The history of this team, quite different, but still, history of this team definitely taking place during the course of time with the Brave the Wild show. And it's been a long, long ride. And if anybody out there has listened to all 100 episodes, meaning this one included now, wow. I wonder who that is. It would be me, because I always listen back to every episode for quality control. And I like to know if I'm doing a good job or if I'm giving you garbage. That's why the audio sounds better and better and better. That's why my personality, hopefully, improves per se, or like my presentation improves. Personality, presentation, whatever it is. That's what I'm here for, guys. I'm here to give you a good product. And because I love the team so much. And I don't care what the trolls out there say. And I'll talk about that some more as we move on. That's where we started, though, August 24th, 2008. We're talking almost 7 years ago now. About 6.5, but more than 6.5 years ago. It's been a long ride, so a lot of history is taking place over the course of the Minnesota Wild. We'll be talking about that shortly. But as we jump into the other milestones, as I called it, silver episode for the Minnesota Wild, only episode 25, which sounds pretty fledgling, doesn't it? That was recorded or published on October 12th. It was recorded maybe the day before, as Dylan usually would publish it. Nowadays, I get to publish it, so it's quicker, even though we're still on the same site, and I'm kind of like the vice president of operations, you could say, of TSS now. Back then, I was like a temporary contractor. No, I'm just making fun of it. But, 25th episode took place October 12th, 2009. It was titled Some Change, Some Similarities. That's when I was talking about Todd Richards and such, that there's some changes and some similarities to the Wild at that point in time. I was kind of like, I was basically like, I don't know what's going on right now, but we'll see. I mean, it was kind of like the same team that doesn't score that much, but they're playing a little bit more open style of hockey, not that neutral zone trap that drove some people crazy. So, unfortunately, though, we knew it happened to Todd Richards. That bit him in the butt over the course of a 2-year span. He just wasn't that good, was he? He just wasn't that good, yet he always beats us with those Columbus Blue Jackets like he did once again on New Year's Eve. I think we had another New Year's Eve not that long ago. The Wild never win the New Year's Eve game, ever. 3-1. Devin Dubnyk on the net, in the net. So the Wild were still in their developing stage with Devin Dubnyk at that point in time. 3-1. 3-1 against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Anyhow, 50th episode took place October 10th, 2011. That was the golden episode. So it's interesting how it was literally about 2 years apart. It took that long for 25 episodes. But there was a stage of time here where it seemed like episode 100 to be like 5 more years from now. Things were going so slowly, and I'll talk about that some more in a minute. But yeah, that was the 50th episode of the season. Neil Nate Dogg Thiesing was on his like 5th or 6th episode with the team. It was very fun to have him on board. We had a really good time. It was a season preview of 2011-2012, so it was the first milestone that was actually one of the major shows of this of the year, because there's always the season preview, State of the Wild. Those are like the two major shows of the year usually for my podcasts. Of all my shows that I do, but this is the third show of my of all to get to 100. As you go from 25, you go from 1 to 25 to 50, and out to 100. This is the third podcast in my quote unquote career, since I'm not like raking in the dough or anything. But this is my third different podcast to reach 100. So. That's a pretty cool milestone. It makes me feel experienced quite a bit. Purple Mafia achieved that quite a while ago now. I can't even remember what year. I think 2012, if I remember correctly. And then 2013, Timberwolves Explosion reached the 100th episode with Marcus the Forecaster. That was pretty fun. The first episode, or 100th episode of Purple Mafia had Dylan Richardson on board. This time around, I'm going solo, and it's because it would have been kind of on short notice. I don't really want to call anybody right now, and I like the way this show is going with me solo at this point in time, but I would sure welcome Neil Nate Dogg Thiesing on board once again, as long as he's good and ready to go. I'd have him on. I can't bring him on cold, though, and he's just kind of like, yeah, the Wild did good. That wouldn't be a very good show. No. Well, so the coaches, since we started Brave the Wild way back, and it's not that long ago, but it seems like, but really, yeah, it seems like a long time ago, and in a lot of ways it is a long time ago. I mean, you think 2008, that's not that long ago. It is 7 years ago, man. So since we started Brave the Wild, Jacques Lemaire was the head coach during 08-09. He was in his final season with the Wild, if you can believe that. Man, that's how old the Wild, that's how long ago the Wild were around, unfortunately. But, this show goes back to Lemaire. That's like a while ago already. Todd Richards then coached in 09 and 11. He was fired after defeating the Dallas Stars in what turned out to be his last game as head coach of the Wild. And then Mike Yeo was hired after a bit of dancing around with Craig McTavish. Looked like he was going to be the guy, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, I guess not. Mike is, and we thought we were going to go with experience this time around. No, we go with a young guy, Mike Yeo, who bounces all over the place. We've had all kinds of up and down shows with the guy. Early on, I was like, man, this guy's gold. By the end of the year, I was like, boy, he's not that good. But we'll see. Maybe he's just developing. It's just his first year. And then his next year, with much higher expectations, you have the hot and cold bullcrap going on again. And he looked like he was on his way out if we missed the playoffs that year. But then we win against a terrible Colorado team and sneak into the playoffs that year. That was nice. But he was basically on the hot seat at that point after getting shelled and destroyed by the Blackhawks. and then all the bouncing around that took place. The next year, we were higher. We looked really good, and then we had a really low point in the midseason in December-ish, and then it was a remarkable comeback to prominence. And then this year, both cases even more so. And, of course, good moves by the general manager and outbursts by Mike Yeo and practicing after a loss. The Wild have been unbelievable since then. So since that outburst, the Wild have been pretty good at practicing after a loss. Now, they had some bad games after that, but still. A couple weeks after that outburst, it finally took place. That practicing after a loss ended up being a legendary thing for the Minnesota Wild. Playoff appearances since the show started. Well, we made the playoffs in 12-13 with Zach Parise and such, but got beat by the Blackhawks in 5 games. And then last year was fantastic. 13-14, of course, 2013-2014 season. Minnesota Wild went in against Colorado, were competitive the whole way. This time we lost the first game, but made a comeback, won the second. So it was a bit different from 03, but ultimately the finish was awfully similar. As it went to overtime, and the whole game you thought Chicago or Colorado was going to win it. The whole game you thought Colorado was going to win, and they didn't. The Wild just kept answering every goal that Colorado scored, and Mike Yeo looked like an awesome coach at that time with the way he kept the Wild's composure. Fantastic throughout that entire series. Just kept them even keel. He was just so even keel despite all the up and downness of the team. And ultimately, it earned him a 3-year extension. This year it looked like he was fired without a doubt. But ultimately, no. Now he looks like one of the better coaches in all of hockey again. So I don't know what to think. I'm just glad it's working out, and I'm glad that the buttons he's pushing are working. So good for him, without a doubt. Yes, sir. An amazing fact about that, though, way back, well, not way back, but yeah, I guess it is a while ago now, about 3.5 years ago, episode 50, when episode 50 took place with me and Nate Dogg Thiesing, the Wild had not even made a postseason appearance yet during the course of Brave the Wild, so that's kind of sad. But likely this year will be the third in a row. It'll be a three-peat. The Wild are going to make the playoffs, I would think, with 95 points right now with a good amount of time left and playing as well as we are. I think we're going to score over 100, or we're going to get over 100 points this year. That'll be awesome. But this team had 0 playoff appearances at the time, so this was kind of a depressing show in a lot of ways, to be quite honest. It's, we'll talk about that here in a second. Point number 6. The playoff record in Brave the Wild history, well, it's 7-11 right now, and the furthest we've ever been is the second round in 2014. Again, Nino Niederreiter's wonderful goal. The Wild winning in 7 at that case. Of course, we start off with the Wild losing 4-1 to the Blackhawks. They win 4-3 against the Colorado Avalanche last year, and then lose in 4-2 against Chicago. Had it not been for the infamous stanchion bounce, whatever it is, and the Wild went through that again this season in a couple of games. If not for that crazy, unlucky BS, who knows, maybe the Wild would have been 0-3, would have been going through 0-3 again, but they would have probably ran into a freight train again with the LA Kings this time around. The California curse. Oh, you do not want to run into the Ducks or the Kings in the playoffs. I don't know. Point number 7. An interesting show in the history of Brave the Wild. It was very early, way back in the fledgling days of this show. Way back. Episode number 8, January 11th, 2009. The title of that show was Wild Future at a Dead End. That was bad. I mean, I was the first in local media to call for Riseborough's head while showing just how empty the cupboards were. The cupboards were in the system, particularly Houston at the time. I keep wanting to say Iowa now, but Houston at the time. And, of course, the system in general, like overseas. We even had a team called the Louisiana Ice Skaters back in the day. I'm not sure we were affiliated with them anymore, though, at that point. We had the Ice Skaters way back, like in 03. They were still around. My buddy Dave Reinhardt, his wife is from Louisiana, and she used to say, the Louisiana Ice Skaters. She knew who they were. She was very proud to know that, because not many people know about the Louisiana Ice Skaters, as they were the second minor league affiliate for the Minnesota Wild back then. Unfortunately, I don't think we're affiliated with them anymore, and that's a shame. I kind of wish we were. That's cool, the Ice Skaters. That's cool. But yeah, I was. Long story longer. I was one of the first people. In fact, the first people in the media, you could say, calling for Riseborough's head, because nobody in the system was really worth a damn. I mean. this wasn't what you'd call an angry show, but a very telling one. It's and it's conveniently right around that time. Beyond the Pond was saying the covers are awfully bare for the Minnesota Wild right now, and among the prospects, there's like nobody left. Like, what the hell? There is nobody. There's nobody there that's worth anything. It seems like the only players we get are from trades, and that's giving up like third-round picks, and then they're not even good players anyway. Or, we got a free agent, Brian Ralston. That's good. He'll score a lot of goals, but never at a clutch moment. They're not like super high-quality goals. It's like, yay, we lost 4-2, but Brian Ralston got his 35th goal of the season late in the third period. That's what kind of goals Brian Ralston scored, quite honestly. I was never a huge fan of his. And in the shootout, he was absolutely useless. But that was kind of the history of the Wild at that point in time. I mean, you had 1 million players taken in the draft that did not pan out, whether they were first-round picks, second-round picks, third-round picks, fourth-round, fifth, sixth, or seventh. You get the point. They all didn't work out, and the only ones that ever did work out were first-round picks. He never hit on a second-round or a third-round pick. Okay, sure, Nick Schultz and Josh Harding. Well, Josh Harding had some moments, ultimately, but it took about 8 years to get there. 8 freaking years. And then, conveniently, many years later, once he finally looks like a great goalie, he has MS. That sucks. That's a damn shame. One guy that a lot of people thought was the best player in the whole system, Patrick O'Sullivan, never did anything in the NHL. Never did anything in the NHL. Just, he'd score a couple goals here and there, but quite honestly, I mean, I'd rather have Eric Halla than Patrick O'Sullivan, to be quite honest. And he was a 7th-round pick. 7th-round pick. I would much rather have Eric Halla. I'd probably rather have Tyler Graovac at this point than Patrick O'Sullivan. Yeah. And he was looked on as the top prospect in the whole frickin' system at the time. Yeah. That's pretty bad. That was Doug Risebrough, man. I mean, Nick Schultz, 2nd-round pick. He looked really good early, and then ultimately he was just the kind of guy who'd get about 8 points a year. He was just a boring, average, stay-at-home defenseman. Just average at best, to be quite honest. The happiest show, as we happen to number 8 here, the happiest show had to be the 4th of July fireworks show, episode number 56. It was ultimately released July 8th, 2012, because I just couldn't get around to it, even though the trade or the signings took place 4 days earlier. But I wanted to see the press conference and everything first. But yeah, me and Neil talked about the signings of Parisi and Suter on that show, and that was really quite a blast, and it's changed the history of this franchise in a lot of ways. It showed that we're really, really, really after the cup. Definitely. Point number 9, as I numbered this kind of funky, point number 9 is finally the happiest overall moment, though, of the course of Brave Wild was when was no surprise, Nino Niederreiter scoring the game-winning goal in Game 7 last year in Colorado. It hit the post and went in past Varlamov and Patrick Waugh saw his team lose at home in the Pepsi Center 11 years later in a 7th game situation in overtime once again. Thing of beauty. Thing of absolute freaking beauty. So let's wrap this all up with a statement that I got to tell all of you right now about this show. Ultimately, I apologize for the inconsistency in releasing this show over the years. I mean, I really do. I mean, I've been significantly better this year, though. I've been releasing it pretty much every week, and that's helped me get to 100 a hell of a lot faster, hasn't it? It's amazing how this show survived, really, despite these facts, of not releasing the show, sometimes of like 6-month hiatuses at times. We're talking, and then maybe getting some nasty, like, review on Twitter. Can't believe nasty reviews on iTunes. That it sounds literally when you read the review, you can tell the person listened to maybe 5 or 6 minutes of the show, and it was maybe the first 5 or 6 minutes, and that admittedly I was bouncing around too much, but the show dramatically improved after that. And it just shows the attention span of people today. They can't handle it. If the show isn't off to a fantastic start, literally like 3 seconds in, they're going to turn it off. And there were valuable lessons that I had to learn, and I hope I've improved that over the years. But at the same time, it's sad that those reviews are still out there because nothing you can do about it. They're there, and they're stuck there, which pisses me off. But it's sad that people can judge a show within the first 5 minutes and they're done forever. That's BS. It pisses me off. And again, I went through 6-month hiatuses either because sometimes when you have 3 shows or 4, whatever it was, 3 shows for a while there, Purple Mafia, and that season was picking up at the time. And the Wild were so uninteresting some of those years. Now, some of these years they've been really interesting, and I still had hiatuses. I mean, that hurts this show, and it really, 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 I think, hurt the listenership of this show that I think could have picked up in a big way had I released it more often. And if not for the nasty reviews on iTunes during shows, maybe it was my first show back after 6 months, and maybe things weren't all 100% here and now. I was trying to make a little catch-up deal, just a slight catch-up deal. So ultimately, it's the worst show ever, according to some people. Just stuff like that. It all came back to hurt the show. And there were times I thought about just hanging it up and just saying, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do this show anymore. It doesn't look like anybody likes it. And I got Purple Mafia to do, even Showtime and T-Wolves, Timberwolves Explosion. I got these other shows to do. And plus my work schedule just sucks. Especially sometimes when it gets into April and May. Sometimes it gets really hard with the lawn service majorly picking up at those times. And, of course, November's tough as well with fall cleanups. And, I get tired sometimes having to work till midnight at times at my regular job, which is second shift. It's tough. It's tough. And having to watch games back because of that as well. And finding the right time to have the show. And one other thing, too, is there were times I really wanted to have Neil Nate Dogg Thiesing on, and then he'd get really sick, and okay, maybe he's going to come back. Oh, he's not back. And he's going to come back, and he's not back. And then a month later, it's I'm not going to record it right now. Maybe next week. And then next thing you know, it's 2, 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months later. And I haven't recorded Brave the Wild, and I'm guessing a lot of listeners just kind of forgot about the show for some reasons. So, again, just so many reasons. This show could have easily not made it to 100. I feel so good right now. I feel so good to be able to say this is episode 100 of Brave the Wild. We made it indeed. I mean, I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart, and I can't tell you again how proud I am that this show made it to episode 100 at long last. I really hope the next 100 come a lot quicker this time around, and next time we have one of these, we'll be talking about at least one Stanley Cup championship, which 4 years ago was a far cry from the slightest of possibilities. It really was. This team was so uninspiring at the time, and even though Chuck Fletcher was already the general manager, it was still too early to tell just how things were going to develop. It looked promising, but ultimately, results weren't there yet. We were still missing the playoffs with the Todd Richards and such, and the first year Mike Yeo took over, this team had Warren Peters at first-line center that season. Kyle Brodziak was the first-line center, and he had 40 points. That was nice for him, but we had nobody else. It was ridiculous. It was so frustrating. But ultimately, here we are now, Stanley Cup contenders, and that's ultimately the title of this show, Cup Contenders, because we are. So again, hopefully, ultimately, next time around, episode 200, we'll be talking about the times the Wild won the Stanley Cup. I'm going to leave with that thought. All of you have dreams about the Stanley Cup tonight, because I probably will. Take care, everybody. We'll be back next week.